Association. Perhaps a play out of that a bit, not just the NBA's economic interest in China, but also Nike and other product manufacturers' interest in China, both as a market and as a producer. Recent reports have come down because of the continuing trade negotiations and tariffs with China. What was a double-digit growth rate in China has, at last report, dropped to 6%. Some say 2%, and some say even perhaps negative growth. Those policies are having an impact on China economically. China has always been a nation of traders since the days of Marco Polo. And so the economic impact is huge. I think it is a part of the Belt and Road Initiative that you mentioned earlier, where China is using debt diplomacy, basically to enslave countries around the world to Chinese wishes. We have seen the Chinese become more emboldened. And I think the NBA, again, is a recent classic example in flexing their economic power and political power, not only in China, but around the world and even in the United States. We've seen that in Chinese acquisition of media companies and even U.S. companies who have bowed to Chinese pressure being brought if there's any criticism of China. So the economic, our argument has been at ChinaAid for some time that you cannot divorce the human rights situation in China from the economic association that we have with China. As you mentioned in your introduction, I think for decades, administrations in the U.S. have gone upon the assumption that further involvement in the world community of China would ultimately lead to a relaxing of restrictions of human rights in China, and China would enter the world community of civilized nations. Unfortunately, we have seen this is not the case. And I think we have underestimated the Chinese Communist Party's desire to not only exercise control within what is viewed as the historical boundaries of China and even beyond. I think we are now seeing China exercise a desire for world domination economically, politically, and militarily that has not been exhibited in the past, and perhaps we might have associated more with the Soviet Union. So there is definitely a connection between economic power. World history has shown that any economy based upon slave labor cannot survive in the long term. And I think China is seeing that play out in real time. That is particularly true when freedom-loving nations and societies restrict or tie human rights and civil rights to trade partnerships and to economic participations in such organizations as the World Bank and the World Trade Organization. And so it's good to see a rising movement against China on their human rights and civil rights, religious restrictions being tied to economic negotiations and even economic partnerships. Others can be, some would be to restrict U.S. pension fund-based investment in China. I think that's a near financial crisis if we continue to see pension fund invested in Chinese industry. Of course, we hear much about the discussions about intellectual property and the theft of trade secrets by China. The U.S. government has the right under CFIUS to go back and review Chinese acquisitions of American companies and American assets. Would encourage a more aggressive stance on that to further restrict Chinese acquisition of not only future but also to look backwards. Monetarily policy within the World Trade Organization and World Bank have really not been applied toward China as of yet. The U.S. has tremendous power and ability to do that at this time. I think we also see a stiffening resolve from more of a military standpoint, strategic standpoint, in the issue with the South China Sea and China's militarization of those trade routes, strengthening of relationships with Taiwan. We have seen an unprecedented level of, within the U.S. government, of visits and trips to Taiwan, an incredible ally that the U.S. has just a few miles off China's shore. The negotiations, interaction with North Korea is ultimately a China issue, not a Korean issue. And so further movement in that area to attempt toward, I think, what South Koreans certainly would see as a desire for reunification of the Korean Peninsula, but even more importantly, to remove North Korea as a vassal state of China. So there's a number of economic powers. I think those considering cross-investment between the two countries needs to be addressed immediately to disallow, to prohibit U.S. investment in China, particularly with pensions funds, private equity investments, and so forth, university endowments. Those should all be restricted from investment in China, and also to go back and use CFIUS as a way of restricting and reviewing what in past years have been fairly normal acquisition, Chinese acquisition of U.S. companies, to go back and review those and possibly unwind those transactions.
In China, in the Uyghur region and elsewhere. So there's the China Human Rights Documentation Center, which is a bunch of groups here in this room. So again, forgive the pronunciation, Chen Guangguo. I'm gonna get it someday, guys. So I mean, he's a real evil person. And so groups have identified, he's fairly senior, he's not to be top, but he was involved in orchestrating the crackdown on Falun Gong and then on what's happening in the Uyghur and in Tibet. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of folks like that who've been identified. And then in terms of what groups here in DC should do, I certainly have ideas, but...
Yeah, in terms of the...
I myself tried to order a bed cover on Amazon. It was an excellently cheap price, and it was cotton made in China, and I thought, I'm going to go ahead and pay double. And so the role that we have to play is something I want to unpack when we talk about recommendations. There are American companies who have knowingly and unknowingly invested in some of the products in the Uyghur region. So I want to turn now, since this is a briefing about religious freedom, and talk about the fact that, unfortunately, even though Uyghurs are predominantly Muslim, we have not seen a lot of Muslim-majority nations speaking out against what is happening in the Uyghur region. Of the 37 countries that signed on to the recent letter to the UN praising China's policies in the Uyghur region, I think more than 10 of those were Muslim-majority states: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Egypt, Kuwait. Some of those folks are obviously signing on to that letter for their own purposes, but the letter itself actually called what the CCP is doing a remarkable achievement in human rights. From a foreign policy perspective, how important is it for Muslim-majority nations to put pressure on China to close the camps and end their policies in the Uyghur region? And from a faith community perspective, what can be done to get Muslim-majority nations more involved?
Activities that we all can do together, and then this event today is like a really good example of like 4 different NGOs coming together on the Capitol Hill and then raise Uyghurs' voice. And then also like there's like different types of like events that your organization, like a different organization, can help Uyghurs. And then the UHRP, Uyghur American Association, Uyghur Entrepreneurs Network, that like they are all doing their great jobs, but on the like people on the side, like there are still lack of like lots of resources. So it's really good to have different organizations come together and then have those kind of events, and then that like give us a chance to talk to local people and then ask them to contact their representatives on the Congress. Because the first information we face, like when we have like especially like advocacy week, is that we don't have like one person from that specific district to that specific congressperson. So I'm from Virginia, and then I'm meeting with like Maryland or Pennsylvania and a specific like district there. So we want to have those kind of people from the grassroots level to speak to their own representatives and then explain what's happening and ask them to sponsor. New York on a game that they were holding a sign Google Uyghurs, and then we did a like Google trend like a search after that, and then especially after that specific event, the Uyghur word in the Google like search engine like just got like sky high. So, and then we are also like on the 30th in the Washington DC, there's a game between the Washington Wizards and then the Rockets. So we are also planning in your community to have a group of people to go there and hold the signs. And then we also ask if anyone can join us. We can raise like we can be much stronger and much louder. So yes, we are working on it. And then since our community is like really small in Washington, like it's in the whole U.S., and then also there is many people they got scared from the Chinese government from going public. So we need like more American people to stand up for the Uyghurs and to support them, like you did last time in the game.
Had a lot of fun.
Especially like my aunt Shadia Zakir and her husband Trahon Jurbai. They just got sent to the prisons because of my actions. And then that's the way how China makes someone or some group of people guilty about their decisions. And then I was trying to add one more point to your earlier questions, if I can. So there's like rumors, and then like we were hearing that some people are getting visa to travel to China, like some Uyghurs in the US or Turkey. And then some of their relatives are getting their Chinese passports and then coming to US or different countries to visit them. I was talking to my aunts when we were coming to DC this morning, and I told them that yeah, that's what they do, because they kind of reward the people who stayed silent about their own crimes, the Chinese government crimes. So in one way, they give a signal to the people like myself, like if you're being silent about what we do, you will be able to get a passport. And then if you just multiply it by a million times to like on the country, on the political level, that's what exactly they do to like a specific business group like NBA, Apple, or like Walmart, or any different like corporations. Like if you stay silent about our human rights violations, we're gonna give you market share in our country, so you can become a billionaire, so your stock price is gonna go up. If you don't, we're gonna kick you out. And then on the other side, the governments, that's the main reason that there are many governments staying silent about China. As there is like a many politicians and the former and current ambassadors to China, they specifically say that that's how the Chinese government talk. And then the Prime Minister from Pakistan, he also said he knows about the issues about the Uyghurs and what they are facing in the region. But because of his economic ties with the Chinese government, he cannot talk to them directly or criticize them openly. And then he said that the Chinese government, he likes to have those kind of conversations under the table, under the rug. So from the personal level, by getting or not getting a visa, or by being able to talk to, like I said, seeing your family member, to the corporations, the NBA especially, the good example, and then Apple that they just take down 2 apps from their iTunes store, and then the governments around the globe. So the same thing that they are using to silence all the opponent voices.
Thank you, that's an excellent point.
Months, 11 days in the camp and the prison. My mom was released late May, but our communication was still cut off like from the day she was released until sometime like mid-June. And so after like I think June 15th, our communication was restored. I can talk to my mom right now. But as I said earlier too, like there is 2 cameras right outside of my grandmother's house facing towards to the front entrance. So they know like who's coming in, who's going out. And then the reporter from the New York Times, like he went to my grandmother's house on a rainy day with a hat and an umbrella on. But after 15 minutes, to local government officials just showed up with different reason, and then they found out there was a special gas and they called the police. So, and then I talked to my mom, but as Marcana said earlier too, like there is a government official, a lady from our neighborhood. She comes to and sleeps with my mom every other night. And then there is a police, and then there is some government officials. They come to visit my mom at least once or twice a week, just to ask her like how is she doing and how is she convincing me to stop criticizing the government. And then there is some other like kind of low-level officials, like I said, the people who work in the local government. They come and they just check on my mom, and they take a picture of my mom, and they just send to some people that nobody knows. So, but my mom is free, but everything that she does is physically and mentally monitored by the government. And then there is no way that I can talk to my mom openly. But at the same time, my aunt and my uncle, my aunt is sentenced to 7 years, and then my uncle is 8 years, after they worked for the Chinese government for more than 30 years and just retired in 2014. I got that news that they were sent to the prisons 3 days after I met with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in late March this year. So, but on the other side, I keep receiving threat calls from the Chinese police or security agents. One of them added me on the beach in early June and then said that he was the one who helped me to release my mom, and I have to appreciate his help, the Chinese government. And then I had to listen, my whole family had to listen to him in order to get my mom a passport. And after I declined, he said that, okay, so you're only one guy going against the superpower of the world, and you have to be careful, you have to bear the consequences, and then there is a huge price to pay. And then just last week, there's another guy who added me on the WeChat, and then told me that even though I'm a US citizen right now, but I was raised in China, I got all their benefits, and then as I have my mom and then my loved ones still here in the place, so I have to praise Chinese government instead of criticizing them, and I have to say nice things about them, and then my family will be safe. So every single decision I make that comes with consequences, and then also, as American has stated, I'm not the only person. I'm not the only Uyghur American that was getting those kinds of threats, but I'm one of the really few of them that who got the courage to speak out after every single threat. But I don't know after this meeting today what I will hear from my mom or what kind of message I will receive. But I'll see.
And the people adding you on WeChat and threatening you are Chinese security agents, presumably.
So, yes, I guess so, because I try to ask them, who are they, their real name or their maybe badge or something, and then they say, you got to know, who I am, because I got all the information about you. And I said, what kind of information do you have? So the one that added me in early June, he told me that I gave a similar, speech at George Washington University with Lou Canesa from the World Legal Congress in early June. And he told me that we know that you were in that the conference, and he gave a speech with the World Legal Congress people, and then we follow you on the Twitter, Facebook, everything, and we know what you do. And then, who do you talk to? Everything is open to us, and I'm 10 years older than you. So they got all the information about me. That's one reason. And the second reason is, after the second guy added me on, I asked him, how should I trust you? And then he said that, you got to trust me because there is no other, regular people who can add you on the WeChat right now, given on your situation. So we have regular meeting in our office about what you do, along with some other guys. We discuss about you guys all the time. So they are from, really high level, and I'm just the regular, the guy who just does coding and then dealing with those kind of people.
List of action suggestions for ordinary people. And also, can I announce one other thing? So a week from yesterday, October 29th, will be another public event here in Washington at the National Endowment for Democracy, featuring the launch of the Uyghur Human Rights Project's next report. It's called Demolishing Faith, the Demolition and Desecration of Uyghur Mosques, enshrined. So that's next Tuesday morning. It's on Eventbrite.
So this Mr. Tashpolat is one of them. So he was sentenced to death and with 2 years of prison. So it was in, I think, we published a report a few months back and documented this, detention of the 480 Uyghur intellectuals who are the doorkeepers of the Uyghur culture and Uyghur history, Uyghur literature. So this indicates the Chinese intention, what Chinese intention is and what Chinese government want to achieve. So to eliminate, culturally exterminate the Uyghur people by detaining. So it hasn't stopped. Although we have reported already, maybe almost a year ago about this harassment to the government officials, and they haven't, I think, took any very strong action to stop that. It should be stopped. They should take some actions to stop this Chinese harassment of the Uyghurs. I think it continues. In the U.S. there are about 5,000 Uyghurs. So all of them have relatives back home. It is very obvious that all of them have someone in the country. But only a few people showed the courage to come up and speak up about the harassment of their relatives. So there are about 5-6 people in the U.S. who, publicly spoke up about the harassment of their relatives. That shows how this, the intimidation has been effective. So people doesn't want even to come forward and tell us that the Chinese government is harassing. So that is U.S. government, especially the law enforcement agencies, should take immediate and strong actions to stop this harassment, and they should, also find ways to communicate with the local Uyghurs and give some confidence for them that they will be protected, because they, feel that they are very vulnerable, and if they speak up, the Chinese government, will, the U.S. government will do nothing, and the Chinese government will punish their relatives back home.